Okay, Erin, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so good afternoon. My name is Ashley Bell, and I am an environmental and energy stewardship educator for the University of Illinois Extension. So I'm located in central Illinois. I'm housed in the Christian County office in Taylorville. So thank you so much for attending today's webinar, and it's focused on managing waste at home. So this webinar is a part of the Everyday Environment webinar series. So make sure to check us out for our other upcoming webinars that are being offered at the same time on Thursdays at 1 p.m. So usually when I teach my programs in person, I really like to have an interactive experience to stimulate learning as well as to increase engagement. So throughout today's webinar, I will have a few poll questions and activities. So please provide me with your feedback when prompted. Okay, so in today's webinar, we will learn about how municipal solid waste is managed in the U.S., including the operation of the modern sanitary landfill. Then we will have an activity to help you learn about the length of time it takes for various materials to break down, and we will take a closer look at the waste management hierarchy and talk about some strategies for diverting waste from materials from the landfill. And then we will wrap up and we'll discuss materials that can be recycled and composted, and we'll assist you in locating recycling and composting facilities throughout Illinois. So let's jump in here and talk about waste. So waste is any unwanted substance or material. So there are several different types of waste, such as municipal solid waste, industrial solid waste, and hazardous waste. So with municipal solid waste, that's just the non-liquid waste that comes from places like our homes, institutions, such as say schools, hospitals, as well as businesses. So municipal solid waste, it's just another term that we use to refer to, say, trash or garbage. So just think about the trash that we put out on the curb for the garbage truck to collect. That's what we call municipal solid waste. So basically it's like your packaging, food scraps, yard trimmings, furniture. That's municipal solid waste. Now with industrial solid waste, that is waste material, and it results from, say, industrial activities such as, say, mining for minerals or coal, or say waste from the production of consumer goods, or even say agricultural waste. And with hazardous waste, that's just waste, and it can be, say, toxic, reactive, or corrosive. Now, today we are going to focus on managing municipal solid waste. So remember, this is waste that's coming from places like our homes, institutions, as well as small businesses. Now, although municipal solid waste, it only makes up a small percentage of the total amounts of waste material that's produced in the US, it is the type of waste that we have the most direct impact on due to our activities and our day-to-day choices that we make. Now, most of us, we have been up at least for a few hours, so I want you to answer a few questions for me. So with our poll questions here, can you answer this for me? Have you thrown anything into the garbage can today? And if you have, what materials have you thrown away? So you can select as many as you want as items as what you have thrown away today. So I'll allow a few more seconds. Okay. So we have our results here. So it seems like most of us have thrown away something today, and the majority of us threw away paper, followed by plastics, and the close third was food waste. Okay, so now typically when I teach this class in person, I have lots of props and activities that I come with. And so at this point in time, I would typically pass around my big bag of trash here. And that bag of trash, it represents the amount of trash that's generated daily in the US by a person. And I would ask each person to guess the weight. But today, since we're doing this virtually, let's poll the audience again. And let's see, how much waste do you think a person in the US generates each day? Okay, so we had a tie. People think between 3 to 4 pounds or 5 to 6 pounds. Now, according to the latest data from the US EPA, on average in the US, people produce 4 to 5 pounds worth of municipal solid waste per day. Now, Americans, we are generating more waste per person than any other nation in the world. We're creating a lot of household waste. And the amount of municipal solid waste that's generated in Illinois is greater than the national average. And about over a third of that, it actually comes from our residential households. So the US EPA, they collect data about the types as well as the amounts of waste that's generated in the US. And so the data I'm showing you today comes from the latest facts and figures, and they're available from the Advancing Sustainable Materials Management fact sheet. And that fact sheet was released in November of 2019. So we currently have data about the generation of municipal solid waste now through 2017. So if we look at this particular graph here, we can see that on the y-axis here, we have the amount of waste that was generated in million tons, and here we have years on the x-axis. So if we follow these blue triangles here, we can see that the amount of municipal solid waste has increased in the US. And in 2017, we produced 268 million tons of municipal solid waste. So that represents about between 4 to 5 pounds worth of municipal solid waste being generated per person daily. Now, I'm going to launch another poll here. Now, if we were to look at the US municipal solid waste stream and we were to break it down by material, what do you think is the largest component of our US waste stream? Okay. So many of you think that plastics is the largest component of our waste stream, followed by food. So let's see. So remember, we said there was 268 million tons of municipal solid waste that was generated in 2017. So this pie chart here, this is giving us a breakdown by material. And we can see that the biggest component of the municipal solid waste stream was paper at 25%, followed by food at 15.2%. Now, I want to point out to you that we're looking at paper and paperboard now. So although with paper and paperboard, that was the largest component of our municipal solid waste stream, the amount of paper that's in our waste stream has actually shown a decrease since about the 2000s. And that's mainly due to factors such as, say, more newspapers are becoming smaller or even obsolete, or they're becoming digitized. And there's more use of emails now that has also resulted in a decrease in the amount of paper that we use. And fewer workplaces are using paper for conducting businesses as well. So remember food waste, that was the second largest component of our waste stream that we generated. But you can see that unlike paper, that we have actually seen that the amount of food waste in our waste stream has actually been on the increase. It's been increasing. Okay. So we've talked now about the amount of trash that we've generated in the US, as well as the different materials that make up that generated waste stream. So let's move on now and let's focus on what actually happens once we throw our garbage into the trash can. So some of you may actually remember a time when you would just take your trash to an open dump. And these dumps were more or less just say like a large hole where they would just dump the trash and they left. And they really weren't managed well, if at all, and they often led to, say, unpleasant odors, and it led to pests as the trash was just left there to decay as it was lying out in the open. So these dump sites, oftentimes attributed to the underlying soil and the water, they were often being polluted because as that rain trickled through that trash, it picked up contaminants, and those contaminants could travel downward to contaminate the soil, the groundwater, as well as nearby water bodies. So today we have the modern sanitary landfill. Now, these have been strategically designed to try to minimize soil, air, as well as water pollution. So once we put our trash out on the curb, the garbage truck comes to collect it and takes it to the landfill. Now with this figure here, this is showing us a cross section of what a modern sanitary landfill looks like. So basically, they will dig a large hole, but before any waste is put into this hole, they want to make sure that they are preventing that underlying soil and that underlying groundwater. They want to protect it from being polluted. So if you're getting your drinking water from this particular aquifer, you definitely would not want a contaminated source of water that you have to drink. So therefore, this hole here, before they put any trash into this hole, they will line it with different types of materials. So if I can get my cursor to work here, let's see. They will line it with materials such as an impermeable clay liner, a plastic liner, and different types of gravel to try to reduce any contaminants from getting down to our clean soil in our water. Now in your landfill, there may also be located at the bottom of your landfill these pipes here. Now these pipes here are called your leachate collection pipes. So think about this, as it rains or as water enters into the landfill and as it travels through the trash, that water can be contaminated. It's going to pick up contaminants from the trash. And that contaminated water is what we call leachate. So these pipes here at the bottom of our landfill, they're going to collect that leachate water and transport that water through our leachate collection system for that water to be treated to be decontaminated. Now, moving back over here into our landfill, now it's time to deposit our trash. So you can see that in these rectangles here, these are called sections or cells. So this is where the trash is actually deposited. So each day the trash is placed into a cell, and at the end of the day, it is covered with a layer of soil. So they cover up this trash with this layer of soil in order to, say, control odors. They want to keep the pest away, as well as if it rains, it wants to minimize that infiltration of water into the landfill. So this helps to reduce the amount of leachate that actually ends up in our leachate collection system. So it helps to reduce the amount of leachate that we actually have to treat. All right, so we have our trash here in our cell. And you can see here we have what's called the methane gas recovery well. So as this trash is breaking down in the landfill, we have microorganisms that are decomposing this trash in an oxygen depleted environment. So as the trash is being decomposed, methane gas is produced. Now, instead of allowing for this methane gas to just go up into the atmosphere and contribute to greenhouse gas emissions, some landfills will actually capture this gas and they will burn it off using a methane flare. Whereas other landfills, like what's pictured in this system here, they will collect that landfill gas and they will use that landfill gas for heating, or they may use it for electricity generation. So as you can see, this modern sanitary landfill, it has been designed to minimize soil, water, as well as air pollution. But we have essentially created compacted layers of trash that aren't really exposed to much air, water, or say sunlight that helps this trash to naturally decompose. Therefore, this trash that's in these cells, that's in these sections, it's essentially preserved inside the landfill. So the rate of decomposition is so slow that they have actually found hot dogs in the landfill that were 40 to 50 years old. So yes, that's how slow the rate of decomposition can be in our landfill. Okay, so I want to give you a better idea now of the length of time it takes for materials to, say, naturally break down, to naturally decompose. So let's do an activity. So shown here are several items. And these items here have been arranged by the length of time it takes for them to naturally break down. So they are arranged here from the longest length of time to break down all the way to the shortest length of time to break down. So we're going to use poll questions, and I would like for you to take a quick guess of the length of time you think it would take for each of these items to naturally decompose, to naturally break down. So I will give you a hint, and the hint is that items that are made from glass, plastics, or metals take a much, much longer time to break down in comparison to items that are made from plants or animal materials. So let's look at our first item here. Our first item is a glass bottle. So how long do you think it will take for a glass bottle to break down? Maybe never, 500 years, 100 years, 50 years, 10 years, or 5 years? Okay, let's move to our next item. We have a plastic diaper. For our plastic disposable diaper, how long will it take for our plastic diaper to break down? Our next item is a steel can. How long will it take for the steel can to break down? Our next item is a cardboard carton. How long will it take for the cardboard carton to break down? Our next item is a wool mitten. How long will it take for the wool mitten to break down? And lastly, how long will it take for the notebook paper to break down? Okay, so let's look at our answers here. For our glass bottle, that glass bottle may actually never break down. With our plastic disposable diaper, it may take 500 years for that diaper to break down. With our steel can, 100 years. The cardboard carton, 5 years. A wool mitten, 1 year to decompose. And the notebook paper may take about 3 months to decompose. All right, so remember, the hints I gave you was that items made of glass, plastics, and metals take a much, much longer time to break down in comparison to those items made from plants or animal materials. So to try to put this into better perspective for you, remember that it took about 500 years for that plastic diaper to break down. So how long do you think it will take for this cloth diaper to decompose? Oh, well, I already told you the answer there, 4 months. I had a poll for you, but maybe this puts this into better perspective for you. So those plastic diapers that took 500 years, so the diapers I wore, you wore, your grandparents wore, those were still sitting in the landfill today. Whereas these cotton diapers only take about 4 months for them to um, decompose. Now, I want to point out to you that in this particular activity, these items were exposed to air, to water, and sunlight, which helped to enhance microbial decomposition. But in the landfill, remember that the trash is covered with soil. So it's not getting much exposure to the air, water, or sunlight. So that rate of time it takes for trash to decompose in the landfill will be much longer. So that's why it's very mindful that before sending trash to the landfill, we want to be able to save space in our landfills, as well as diverting materials from our landfills, which can contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, so let's move on here and let's talk about better ways that we can manage our waste. So what you see pictured here, this is the waste management hierarchy, and it was developed by the EPA. So this hierarchy actually ranks waste management strategies starting from the most environmentally preferred strategy going to the least environmentally preferred strategy. So you can see that the most environmentally preferred strategy is source reduction and reuse. So the whole goal of this particular strategy, we want to minimize the amount of material that's actually entering into the waste stream in the first place. Now, we can accomplish this in various ways by, say, changing our purchasing habits, where we are, say, buying products that has less packaging. We are donating gently used items for others to enjoy. We are, say, practicing backyard composting to prevent the waste from entering into the waste stream in the first place, or even, say, leaving those grass trimmings on the yard, or, say, using a reusable bag at the grocery store, or, say, using dinnerware instead of plastic cutlery. So those are some examples of source reduction and reuse, preventing those materials from entering the waste stream in the first place. Now, the next environmentally preferred strategy, that was recycling and composting. So once those materials have actually entered into the waste stream, we want to take efforts to actually recover those materials that can be used in new products. And this helps to keep those products out of the landfill. So remember, in 2017, we had about 268 million tons of municipal solid waste that was generated. So if we look at this blue line here, we can see that about 94 million tons of municipal solid waste was either recycled or composted. So this means that about 35% of that generated waste stream was diverted from being sent to the landfill thanks to recycling and composting efforts. So we're back to this pie chart again. Now with this particular pie chart, we're looking at how that generated municipal solid waste stream was managed. So we've already discussed that about 35% of that generated waste stream was recycled or composted. And so that leaves about 13% that was combusted for energy recovery. And a little bit over 50% of that waste stream was actually sent to the landfill. Now, over the years, even though the amount of municipal solid waste that we are generating is increasing, the amount that's actually ending up in the landfill has shown a slight decrease thanks to recycling, composting, and combusting. Okay, so we're talking about recycling. Remember, that's that second tier of our waste management hierarchy. So we're looking at how our materials were recycled by material. So you can see here that paper and paperboard was the largest component of materials that was recycled, followed by metals here at about 12%. So steel and aluminum are some of the most recycled metals. And if we look at the materials that were composted, you can see that yard trimmings was by far the top material composted in comparison to food waste. So more and more states, they are actually starting to ban food waste from entering the landfill. So by composting and by using energy recovery methods, such as, say, anaerobic digestion, those are being increasingly utilized to handle this food waste and to try to divert it from going to the landfill. So in this particular graph, you can see that since the 1990s, that the US has seen a significant increase in the amount of food that's being composted. So remember, that's diverting that food from going to the landfill. So not only is it saving space in our landfill, but it's also helping to decrease those methane emissions from going into our atmosphere. Okay, so remember, we had about a little bit over 52% of that generated municipal solid waste stream that was actually sent to the landfill. So in this pie chart here, it is showing us a breakdown by material of what actually went to the landfill. So in our pie chart, we can see that food waste made up the largest component that actually went to the landfill at 22%, followed by plastics. And then we have paper and paperboard as the third largest component that went to our landfill. So we're still talking about that second step there of our waste management hierarchy, the recycling and composting. So we must be very mindful because how we actually handle our waste, it's going to determine where it ends up. So let's talk about the recycling steps now. So what you see pictured here is the recycling symbol, or some people may even refer to it as the three chasing arrows. So recycling basically consists of 3 steps. So first, in the collection step, that's where the recyclable materials is basically collected and then it's processed. So essentially those materials, they're getting sorted, they're getting cleaned, shredded, and they're being prepared to be used in a new product. And then in our second step, in production, those recovered materials, those are the materials that are being used to make a new product. And then lastly, in our third step, this is where the consumer must actually purchase the product. Now, I want to point out to you something that's really important. Now, just because you see this recycling symbol on a product does not necessarily mean that it can be recycled in your area. So always check with your local recycling center to determine what materials they will accept. And to be even more sustainable, look to purchase those items that are actually made from materials that are accepted by your local recycling facility. All right. Now, if you recall, we had paper and paperboard. That was the biggest component of our municipal waste solid stream, our municipal solid waste stream. Now, most of us, we actually use paper in a variety of different forms every day. So some paper items that can be recycled include corrugated cardboard. Now in 2017, this corrugated cardboard was actually the most recycled material. So I'm quite sure in many households these days, the volume of online shopping has probably increased. So instead of throwing those boxes away, consider recycling those corrugated shipping boxes. Now, typically, many of these boxes themselves, they have already been made from recycled materials or say from lumber industry byproducts such as say sawdust and wood chips. Now, there's another option too that you can do with our corrugated cardboard boxes. Another option would be to reuse. So there are several different types of give back box programs, and how this works, you'll take your cardboard box and you'll fill it with gently used items that you want to donate, and you can ship that box for free with a prepaid shipping label that you can print from online, and that box ships to charity. So not only are you helping to reuse that cardboard box, but you're also helping to reuse some items, that those gently used items that you no longer had a use for, and you're keeping them out of the landfill as other people are able to enjoy them. Now, beyond these cardboard boxes, if we look at some other paper materials that we can recycle. So many of us, we probably say have old magazines, we have old shopping catalogs, junk mail, or even say old phone books lying around. So those all can be recycled. So even the ones with those glossy and shiny appearances, oftentimes those can be recycled too. And if you get your juice, or say your dairy, your milk, in a cardboard carton, those too can be recycled. But I want to tell you that if you have a cardboard box, say like a pizza box, and it has been soiled, if it has like grease stains or say cheese on it, we want to keep that dirty cardboard. We don't want to place that inside of our recycling bin. So the more paper products that we're actually able to recycle, that means that we're not nearly having to cut down nearly as many trees to make new products. Because cutting down trees, not only does it have it has a big environmental impact, but it's also, say, destroying wildlife habitats, it's causing soil erosion, as well as reducing the capability for carbon dioxide to be removed from our atmosphere. So sometimes people, they wonder, so how exactly do we really quantify environmental benefits that are associated with, say, diverting waste materials from the landfill? So the US EPA, they have actually developed a tool called the WARM model. And this model is used to actually quantify environmental benefits that are associated with sustainable material management. So WARM, it stands for Waste Reduction Model. Now, specifically, WARM is looking at, it's quantifying reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. So in this particular example here, we're looking at paper and paperboard, because remember that was the biggest component in our municipal solid waste stream. So about 44.2 million tons of paper was recycled in 2017, and this equates to a reduction of about 148 million metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. So to actually put this into better perspective for you, this reduction is equivalent to about 31 million cars being removed off the road each year. So we're moving on to metals that can be recycled. So many of us, we probably drink beverages such as, say, colas, juices, sparkling waters from an aluminum can. So this aluminum can is 100% recyclable. So some aluminum can recycling centers, they will even buy your cans from you. So they'll pay you for that can. So a fun fact for you: did you know if you were to recycle an aluminum can today, that it could be back on a store shelf as quickly as 60 days? Just that quick. So remember, that aluminum can, it is 100% recyclable. Now, many of us, we also consume canned goods. And these cans here, they are made from steel and tin. So we can recycle those. Just remove the label, make sure you're removing those food particles, and place that in your recycling bin. Now, many people aren't really aware that at some recycling facilities, they will actually even accept these aluminum disposable bakeware pans as well as foil. But always remember too, we just want to make sure that we are removing that food residue first before we are putting them into the recycling bin. Okay, so we're moving on to glass. So I've driven by homes and I've seen all sorts of glass items, say such as window panes, I've seen picture frames, I've seen mirrors that were in the recycling bin. Now, typically, these are items that should not be placed in the recycling bin. Now, most glass recycling facilities, they only accept glass in the form of glass bottles and jars. So in many of our households, we can find glass bottles and jars containing things such as, say, oils, sauce, marinades, or even, say, wine and beer. So these glass bottles can be recycled, but it's always best to check with your local recycling facility to determine what color glass they actually accept. So the majority of these glass containers that are produced in the US, they are clear. And with those clear bottles, they're just they usually store materials that won't degrade when they're actually exposed to light, whereas the brown bottles and the green bottles are colored in order to preserve the freshness and flavor, as well as to prevent the contents from being exposed to sunlight. Now, oftentimes people, they really do mean well when they're trying to recycle, but I do want to stress this point to you. If your recycling facility only accepts clear glass bottles and jars, please be very careful not to place a brown or a green bottle into the bin. If that colored glass bottle is accidentally missed during the sorting process, then that entire batch of glass that gets chipped into pieces has now been contaminated by colored glass, and that whole batch of glass has to be disposed of if that batch of glass was going to be used to make new clear glass products. And in Illinois, facilities have reported contamination rates anywhere ranging from 18% up to 30%. So again, be very careful, be very mindful when you are going and putting your items into the recycling bin. All right, so we're moving on to plastics. Now with plastics, we can recycle plastic containers such as plastic bottles, plastic jugs, plastic tubs, but this requires us to do just a little bit of investigative work in order to determine if that container is indeed recyclable. So on the bottom of many of our plastic containers, you may notice the recycling symbol, and it contains a number in it ranging anywhere from 1 to 7. So this number, it represents the type of resin that the plastic container was made from. So again, it's always best to check with your local recycling facility to determine what type of plastic they will accept, as well as the type of plastic containers such as bottles, jars or jugs that they will accept at the facility. Now, in many areas, the number 1 plastic and the number 2 plastic are the only plastics that are accepted due to them being easier to recycle. So if you're wondering what the number 1 plastics are, those are kind of like your most commonly used for single-use water bottles, as well as your soda bottles. That's number 1 plastic. And then with your number 2 plastics, that's a stiffer plastic. So it's used for things like detergent bottles as well as milk jugs. So remember, with our plastic recycling, we are recycling those plastic bottles, jugs, as well as tubs. Now, We shouldn't typically place plastic items such as, say, toys or, say, plastic bags into the recycling bin. Now, with plastic bags, as well as, say, your plastic packaging that you place around a case of water, and you may have, say, the plastic bubble wrap, or even, say, those shipping air pillows that come in your shipping packages, oftentimes those can be placed in those barrels where those plastic bags are accepted at the grocery store. That's where you can take those items. All right, let's move on to looking at e-waste. So with e-waste, it's becoming a growing problem because with technology, it's changing ever so rapidly. And people are disposing of their old devices even if nothing is wrong with if even if nothing are wrong with them in order to have the latest technology. So e-waste is basically classified as unwanted electronics. So electronic waste may consist of unwanted items such as, say, DVDs, players, TVs, computers, cell phones. That's all unwanted waste electronics. That's e-waste. So we should never send our e-waste to the landfill because it contains so many precious resources that can be used again. So think about the gold, the copper, the zinc that could be used to make new electronic devices. Plus, with e-waste, it also contains toxic metals. And that's toxic metals like lead and mercury and chromium that we don't want in our environment. But I do want to stress this to you. Again, it's always best to check with how your e-waste recycler actually handles their e-waste, especially if you're trying to recycle a device such as, say, a computer or an iPad that may have some personal or some sensitive information on it. So find out if they will give you a certificate that that information on your hard drive has been destroyed so that you are protecting your sensitive information as well. So we're moving on to looking at composting. So remember we talked about food waste and how it made up the largest percentage of the municipal solid waste stream that actually gets landfilled. So a solution to this for diverting that food waste from going to the landfill is by us composting. So with composting, this is just where microorganisms such as, say, bacteria or fungi, they decompose, they're breaking down that organic material like food scraps, and they're turning it into a nutrient-rich material that can be used as a soil amendment. So there are several different ways that you can participate in composting. So we have backyard composting, we have curbside pickup services that are available in select locations. So let's first look at our backyard composting. So in our backyard compost bin, you can compost your food waste as well as those yard trimmings. Now for our best result to practice composting, you want to add brown organic materials such as, say, your wood chips, your paper, or your dead leaves. And this brown organic material is going to supply those microbes with carbon. Now we also want to have green organic materials. So that's things like grass clippings and fruit and vegetable rinds that's going to provide those microbes with a nitrogen source. And for that best ideal ratio, we want to add 1 part brown to 1 part green. And you also want to make sure that you're providing adequate aeration as well as adequate moisture to enhance that environment for those microbes to decompose the material. Now I mentioned that we also had curbside composting. So if you don't have a backyard for composting, or you would just rather another option would be to get a pickup service where the haulers will pick up your food scraps from your house. Now, for residential customers, how this works, this typically involves having a subscription service. And this is where they will provide you with a 5-gallon bucket, and you'll collect your food waste in that bucket or any other type of compostable material. And the hauler will pick it up from your curb, give you another clean bucket, and then they'll take that collected waste and take it to the composting facility where that food waste and those other organic materials are turned into a nutrient-rich soil amendment. And oftentimes that compost is actually sold to municipalities as well as landscaping companies. Now, with that backyard compost bin, it is typically not recommended to put things such as like meat and oils and dairy into that backyard compost bin. But typically with commercial composting facilities, they will accept a wider variety of things. So they will accept the meat, the bones, the dairy, and so make sure again that when you decide to participate in this service, that you look through their list of the things that they will accept at their facility. All right, so oftentimes people, they do want to practice recycling. They do want to compost, but they just don't know where to go. So I want to actually point you to a resource, and it was developed by the Illinois EPA, and this is to assist you in locating recycling and composting facilities near you. So I have the link down here to the Beyond the Bin interactive map, as well as a recycling guide here. And this is a quick resource guide for items that can be recycled that's available for you. So let's click on this particular link here so that we can look at items with our interactive recycling bin. Erin, can you see the map on the screen?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so we have our map here, and this is going to help us locate recycling facilities near us. So with this interactive mapping feature, you can work this in several ways. So you can actually search by address with this particular icon, or you can search by material. Say, for example, you wanted to search for a place that you could take glass. You would use this particular icon. So let's do an example here. Let's do the capital. Let's do Springfield. Type in a zip code here. And you can also change the radius that you actually want to search, anywhere from 0 to 50 miles. So for this particular example, we're searching within this 15-mile radius here of 62712. So you can see here that it breaks down by material where we can take those items. So if we click on aluminum here, it says there are 7 locations. So we can click on aluminum and it will tell us the different facilities that will accept our aluminum materials. Or if we wanted to say search by a particular material, let's say you had an old television that you wanted to send to an e-waste handler. So we can scroll down here. So you can see there's different types of materials here like aluminum and carpet, compost, food scraps, household batteries, hazardous waste, even medication disposal. But if we go here to say electronics, because we wanted to get rid of that old television set, we could click on electronics. And it tells us that within that 15-mile radius here, there are 15 places that we could take our electronic devices. And what's nice about this particular feature, you can also zoom in or even zoom out. And as you zoom out, it will readjust and tell you all of the different places that you can actually take your items to be handled. right, so in summary, if we want to be better environmental stewards, and we want to play a meaningful role in, say, reducing the amount of trash that gets generated, as well as reducing the amount of trash that's ending up in our landfills, we can practice those steps of refusing items if we don't need them. We can practice source reduction, reusing, recycling, as well as composting. So I have a personal challenge for you. So consider doing this: tracking just how much waste does your household generate weekly, or even say daily if it makes the task more manageable for your household. And then I want you to break down that waste stream by material type. So break it down, say food waste, plastics, paper, and glass. And then I want you to identify which materials make up the greatest component, which make up the largest component of your household waste. Then determine ways that you can decrease the amount of trash that you generate, as well as decrease the amount of trash that you send to the landfill, and put those strategies into action. So I thank you so much for attending today's webinar. I would greatly appreciate if you would take the time, a few minutes, to share your thoughts and feedback about today's webinar. You can even scan the QR code here directly with your mobile device, or click on the website link here that will take you to our survey. So again, this webinar is a part of the Everyday Environment webinar series. And on next Thursday, the webinar will focus on the Illinois Nutrient Loss Reduction Strategy. So please be sure to register for that workshop using our link as well. All right, so I've taken us up to the 2 o'clock hour. Erin, are there any questions that we have in the chat box?
There are a few, Ashley, if you have a couple minutes to stay on.
Okay.
We can get those answered. So the first question, and you have, I believe, answered it, but just kind of a definition clarification. When we talk about municipal solid waste, does that include items that are also recycled? And then we just kind of take that portion of those items out when we look at what makes up that municipal waste?
Yes, so municipal solid waste is just any items that come from places like our homes, schools, and businesses. So like packaging, yard trimmings, food waste, even paper, that's all considered municipal solid waste. It's garbage. So once it gets generated, that's a part of our generation, that's a part of our waste stream. But we can take some of those items out of our waste stream and actually recycle them so that they do not go to the landfill.
Perfect, wonderful. We had a couple questions about specific items that you can recycle. So one of them was, can you recycle metallic type paper, like that wrapping paper that's that shiny material?
So I'm not as sure about the metallic wrapping paper, but I do know that the actual standard wrapping paper that's non-metallic, that can be placed into the recycling bin.
Okay,
But I think
great.
some of the shiny paper is made out of foils. So you could check to see if it could be recycled for with the metals, but I'm not sure exactly the content of metallic wrap now.
Okay. If you are not able to recycle green and brown glass, is there another option for it, or does it just need to go to the landfill?
Unless you're a crafty person that likes to reuse them, then to reuse them for other items, if you do other, or then yes, if there's no other use that you have for them, then they would have to be landfilled.
Okay. Can you recycle the lids on plastic items? I know, you know, most of our plastic items have a lid on it, and that often doesn't have the symbol on it. So
Right.
What's
So,
that
with our
suggestion?
plastic bottles, it's going to depend on where the recycling facility, how they process their processing capabilities. In different recycling facilities, their processing capabilities will differ from place to place. So, some facilities will say, no, we don't want the plastic lids, where others will say, yes, you can keep them on the bottle and put them into our bin. And you'll even have some facilities that say, we will accept the lid, but take them off and put them in a separate bin for us. So, it just depends on the facility itself.
Okay, great. We've had a few people who have been talking about how plastic bags are not being taken back in many stores right now. And we've had some great suggestions of stores that are taking plastic bags still, so thank you for putting those in the chat box. But related to that, do you know what type of plastic bags are?
Off the top of my head, no, I couldn't tell you exactly what type of material is used to make the plastic bag.
Okay, thank you. A question about composting. About how long does it take to break down the scraps, like the food scraps that were shown in the compost bin?
Well, composting is it's just the decomposition of organic material. So it's naturally just going to happen over time, even if you're not actively turning the pile. So if you're an active composter, which means every 1 or 2 weeks, you're actively turning that pile and you're adjusting that carbon to nitrogen ratio, and you're just really providing proper aeration and water to that compost pile to keep those microbes happy and active, then you could probably produce compost as quick as, say, 6 weeks, but more ideal, 3 months. You could have a completely finished compost product. And sometimes it may even depend up to, say, 6 months, and that's also weather dependent as well.
Okay, great. And just for the sake of time, we'll take one last question. Just asking if there are any suggestions for what you can do if recycling is not available where you live, and all collection locations for certain items like glass within 40 miles were closed in the last year.
I would just really recommend, if recycling is not available in your area, to really just look at your household and look at things that you can change in your household to try to reduce the amount of waste that you can to reduce the amount of waste that you actually put into the waste stream in the first place. So really taking a really hard look at that first step of the waste management hierarchy. So looking at source reduction and looking at reuse as ways to try to decrease waste from entering the waste stream in the first place.
Okay, wonderful. Oh, Anna, there is one more question that I missed higher on my list. We had a few people ask about more of the specifics of that charity donation box program that you talked about, where you fill the cardboard box and send it off. People were asking what charities participate, how to find the label. Do you have any more direction for them to show them where to go for that?
Right. So I don't want to particularly endorse any particular program, but if you Google like Give Back Box program, then they'll pop up some websites for you. And depending on that program, it will tell you the different charities on the website of where you could potentially send your gently used items to. And again, that's free, but if you're actually interested in sending your item to a particular charity, you can actually pay for the postage yourself, and they will accept the items to the charity. You can send those items to the charity of your choice if you pay for the items yourself, if you pay for that shipping label yourself.
Wonderful, great. And one last question came in, and I'm assuming it's pertaining to compost, if you can use treated grass clippings by a lawn service
So
in
if
your
your
compost.
grass was just recently treated, considering we are working, there are microorganisms, living organisms that are decomposing. If it was just freshly treated, I would just recommend not putting that into your compost bin at the moment.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Ashley. Just to be cognizant of everyone's time, we're already 5 minutes over. I think we addressed most of the questions, so thank you, everyone. Thank you so much, Ashley. That was a very informative and wonderful presentation. And since it was recorded, it will be posted on University of Illinois Extension's YouTube page in a few weeks. So you can look for it there to rewatch it and get some more information if you missed something. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you, Ashley.
Thank you. Have a great day.